Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. My name is Raphael. I'm a happily married father of two with a full-time job, and I squeeze in epic ultra running in between. In my previous video, I went through some of the tips for busy parents wanting to go ultra. In this video, I wanted to share with you 7 criteria to select the ultra which is best suited for you. The first thing that you have to do is plan your schedule in advance. Many races fill up really fast, especially the most popular ones, and many of them actually even go through a lottery. For 2022, for example, I started planning as early as October 2021. I looked at which races I wanted to take part in and checked their entry requirements and cutoff dates. For example, the popular Lavaredo Dolomites races, which take place in Italy in June, require pre-registration as early as November with a draw in December of the previous year. The Mont Blanc Marathon races, which are part of the Golden World Trail Series, also taking place in June, require signing up before the end of November of the previous year for a lottery draw the same month. The UTMB has similarly long lead times, with races taking place in August and registration deadlines in January of the same year. Obviously, not all races are as popular as these ones and therefore might not require such long signing up lead times, but most high-profile races usually get sold pretty fast. So do your race wish list early and check what the cutoff dates are for each one so that you avoid any disappointment later down the road. As you do your race wish list, many criteria come into play. Distance is the obvious one that we look at first. If you're planning to do your first ultra, I would recommend starting with a shorter ultra. Yep, not all ultras are 100 miles. There are many races that have shorter distances, but are still defined as ultras. Let's not forget that a race becomes ultra when it's longer than the traditional 26.2 miles or 42.2 kilometers. For example, my first ultra was a 46 kilometer or 28.5 miles race in the Swiss Alps. So I started off on the shorter end of the ultra spectrum, which is what I would recommend if you're starting out as well. So first, look for a race distance that is of a reasonable ultra distance to get to grips with such distances, as these will come with another element which we don't find in traditional marathons: elevation gain. This is the second criteria to consider when selecting your race. In my first short ultra, I had to climb around 2,500 meters or around 8,200 feet, which makes it a totally different animal to a flat race. To get the flat effort equivalent of a course with elevation gain, you need to take the total horizontal distance plus the elevation gain in miles or kilometers multiplied by 10 plus the descent in miles or kilometers multiplied by 3.3. So for example, a 40-mile course with 10,000 feet of positive and negative elevation will be equivalent to the effort of a flat 64-mile course. As I alluded to in my previous video, this means a lot of power hiking. So when you're thinking through which race to do, make sure you also look at the course profile. My first ultra had a pretty flat profile over the first 20 kilometers or 12.4 miles, and then the course took a much steeper incline, which meant a very different sort of effort. The third key criteria is location. As we start out in ultras, I would recommend taking on a race that is closer to your home. The anxiety of the race is already enough without having to add a lot of traveling logistics around it. This is what I did, though I'm fortunate to live near the Alps, which makes it easier to find a long list of races to take part in. The location of the race also drives the costs. You have the fee of the race itself, but you also have to add the transport costs to get to the race, the food, and the accommodation at the race location. If you're looking to integrate the family within this adventure, which is what I recommend for the full-time parents to combine it with a fun family weekend, the bill becomes pricier the further away you go. On my end, I've mostly taken part in races which are located no more than 200 kilometers from where I live, and so easily reachable by car. But as I gain experience, I'll be considering races further afield. These 3 filters will probably already reduce your list of races by a considerable number, but many other criteria come into play when looking through the race list, especially if you're ready to travel a little further. An often looked over element is the technicality of the course. 2 identical races with a similar distance, elevation, and profile could have dramatically different technical levels. A course with a flowing trail is very different to one with a lot of boulders, loose stones, or roots to climb over. This affects the speed at which you can progress, and this is sometimes reflected in the cutoff times to varying extents depending on how difficult the course organizer wants to make the event. So difficulty is influenced not only by the technicality but also the cutoff times. So make sure you check these cutoff times and analyze the level of technicality of a course before you sign up. Usually the official official race website will give you some indications on what type of terrain you'll be running on, with percentages per terrain type. The International Trail Running Association's website, as well as the American Trail Running Association, are great places to find this information. Another good indicator for course difficulty is the indicative performance index level required to finish the race, which is widely used in Europe. This performance index is basically a score that indicates what trail running level you need to be at to have a chance of finishing the race. In Europe, the International Trail Running Association website gives this information in their list of races, and the UTMB also provides this information directly on their website. Looking at one of the races I took part in, for example, the Swiss Peaks 100, and compare it to the UTMB CCC race, which is also 100 kilometers with similar elevation gain, we can see that the Swiss Peaks looks more technical, and therefore we would expect to see a higher required theoretical performance index level to finish the race. But this is actually not the case, most probably because of the aggressive cutoff time for the CCC, which has a 27-hour cutoff time compared to the 31 hours for the Swiss Peaks. In any case, the difference in the indicative finisher performance index between the two races is not huge, and therefore both are probably equally difficult, but for different reasons. The Swiss Peaks being difficult from a technical perspective, and the CCC derives its difficulty from a more aggressive cutoff time. So from my perspective, I would read this as having to run more in the CCC than Swiss Peaks. In my case, I indeed progressed very slowly during the Swiss Peaks 100 due precisely to the high technical level of the course, with several sections requiring chains to help us get across the more perilous sections. I finished the Swiss Peaks 100 in around 27 hours after a 2-hour break midpoint. You obtain a performance index score as you finish different races, and it's calculated by the International Trail Running Association based on the distance, the elevation gain, the average altitude, an estimation of the course technicality, and your finisher time. The International Trail Running Association then calculates your score by taking the weighted mean of your previous 5 best scores. For reference, my performance index score is around 420, which was above the theoretical minimum required to finish the Swiss Peaks 100. The equivalent in the US is probably from the Ultra Sign Up website, which scores participants' time as a percentage of the winners and then take the average of the 5 best scores to calculate the ranking. But there doesn't seem to be an indicative finisher score attached to any of the events to give an idea of the difficulty like in Europe. So I think it will be a matter of digging directly into the event's website and checking the course's description to gauge difficulty. I usually look at my finishing time compared to the winner in the preparation races I do, and then apply that average multiple to the best time in the ultra I want to participate in, and add a little extra to get an estimation of my finisher time. I then compare this to the cutoff time and the other participants' time to get a fair idea of where I could finish, if I can finish at all. Looking specifically at my 2021 season, for example, my time was on average 2 times the winners, even though it improved later in the season. I applied this multiple to the best time of the previous year's Swiss Peaks 100 and saw that I could finish the race within a reasonable time. The outcome was exactly that. I finished near double the winner's time. As you go through the list of races, ask yourself what you're comfortable with or what you want to test yourself. I go for the adventure and not so much for the running, so a course which has less of a rolling profile is better for me. But others prefer wide trails that are unobstructed by stones, boulders, or tree roots. So assess what you want to get out of your race. Another element in choosing your race is whether you want to take part in a stage race or a classic point-to-point course. For example, the Marathon des Sables is a 250 kilometer 7-day stage race across the Moroccan desert. This type of race is usually fully self-sustained. You need to bring your own sleeping bag, food, hydration, and gear, with the organizers only providing a tent. So this is a totally different type of ultra to what we might probably be used to seeing. There are fewer stage races than traditional point-to-point races, and they are more of a logistical headache than the traditional ultras because of their fully sustained characteristic. But I've also found shorter stage races, such as the 100 miles ultra trail of Monte Rosso, which is broken down into 4 stages, and you actually get to sleep in a hotel room, so it's more comfortable than a sleeping bag and a tent. Then you have the very long point-to-point races like the Tour des Géants and the Swiss Peaks 360, which are close to 360 kilometers or 224 miles and can take up to a week to complete, with no organized accommodation except for fold-up beds set up by the organizers in the life bases. So it really depends on what type of experience you're looking for. A newer dimension that has now entered the scene is whether a race is part of a qualifying list of races for more prestigious events such as the UTMB. In 2021, the UTMB group partnered with Ironman plan to create the UTMB World Series, taking the event to a whole new level and creating quite a strong positive and negative reaction from trail runners around the world. In any case, this has set the scene for a whole new trail running landscape in Europe, because the entry requirements to take part in the actual UTMB finals in Chamonix, considered by many as the climax of the trail running season globally, has considerably changed. In the past, to get into the UTMB draw, you only needed a certain number of points from a qualifying list of UTMB affiliate races and then hope for the best during the lottery. I got caught out by this because I did several races that are not on the UTMB list, and therefore these do not contribute to my total UTMB point score. Today, the requirements to enter the draw have changed. Now you not only need a minimum number of UTMB points from their list of qualifying races to be eligible for a given distance, but you also need what they call running stones. You need at least one running stone to enter the UTMB draw. The more stones you collect, the more chances you have of getting picked in the draw. How do you get running stones? By participating in the UTMB World Series majors or event races. These are races directly organized by UTMB. So in a way, they're forcing you to race in at least one of their official races to be eligible to enter their draw for the finals in Chamonix. This is what created quite a reaction on social media when they did the announcements. So how are their series structured? The UTMB World Series is divided into 4 groups. The actual finals in Chamonix, which is the highlight of the series, the majors, which consist of one key event on each continent and gives you double running stones, the events that are a select list of races organized by the UTMB World Series, also rewarding you with running stones but fewer than the majors, and qualifying races, which is a long list of races scattered across the globe that reward you with the race distance points, making you eligible for a given race distance in the UTMB finals, but do not reward you with any running stones. Other races contribute to getting into other high-profile races. For example, the Swiss Alps event that I'll be participating in this year is a qualifying race not only for UTMB but also the Western States, Hard Rock and Badwater. So if you have plans to take part in a high-profile event, you'll need to look into the details of the races you plan to take part in to check whether they contribute in one way or another to the eligibility criteria of the higher-profile events. So this is an illustration of how your list of race choices can be influenced by a grander objective and thus will need additional planning. Specifically for me and my big, hairy, audacious goal, I'm aiming to take part in the UTMB in 2023. For this, I need 2 things as mentioned. First, I need sufficient distance points from races that are on the UTMB series qualifying list, and for this I've already bagged the Swiss Peaks 100, and this year I need to complete the Swiss Alps 100 that will be enough to be eligible for the 100-miler UTMB distance. I selected the Swiss Alps 100 for its awesome course, starting in Fiche at the end of the Valais Canton and circling the valley, going through some of the most beautiful glaciers. The second criteria will be the famous running stones. In order to collect some of these running stones and be eligible to enter the draw of the UTMB, I plan to take part in different preparation races. These include the Wildstrubel 50k that starts in Adelboden and finishes in Grand Montana, which will reward me with 2 running stones. And then I'll try and take part in the new French event in Nice on the shorter end of the race spectrum with around 20k and rewarding me with 1 additional running stone. As the Nice event is further away from my hometown, it will be more of a logistical headache as I will be taking a plane to get there, and therefore I prefer doing a shorter race distance to make the whole logistics easier to manage and not impact the family too much, as the running calendar is already packed enough as it is. These should fulfill the requirements to try my luck in the UTMB draw next year. In addition to these races, I'm planning to take part in other preparation races, but these were not selected on the basis of the UTMB requirements and more based on the dates and the location, trying to fit it in my busy parent schedule. I'm doing a local race, which is the Geneva Eco Trail, which will be around 46 kilometers and 1,400 meters D+, the Swiss Peaks Grammont race with 27 kilometers and 1,700 meters D+, and the famous Marathon du Mont Blanc, which is part of the Golden World Trail series, covering 42 kilometers and 2,500 meters D+, for which I was fortunate enough to be drawn in a very competitive lottery. So in summary, when you choose your ultra, plan ahead of time depending on whether you're aiming to take part in a high-profile event that requires early pre-registration. Look at the distance first and start off with a shorter ultra before tackling the longer distances. Assess what elevation gain you can do and convert this to a flat effort to get a better sense of the required effort needed to finish the race. Check the location of the event, preferring a race closer to home to start off with. Check the technicality of the course and whether it is a match for you. If you can compare your performance index to what is required to finish finish the race, great. Otherwise, dig into the details of the race description to get a good feel of its difficulty. Decide whether you want to do a stage race or a point-to-point race, and assess whether your preparation races contribute to being eligible to the ultra you are planning to do. With this, you will already be able to reduce the number of races available to you and can then look at other filter criteria. I heard some people even select races based on whether a race awards a medal. Good luck and see you on the trails.